scared.
And today, in about 45 minutes or so, we'll get Dr. Meryl Nass back in here. She has some updated information. But first, we're going to speak to Brianne Dressen. She had been injured in the AstraZeneca vaccine clinical trial. She was a participant, now disabled and suing AstraZeneca. She is a vaccine injury advocate. She is co-founder of React 19. She has a book coming out, Worth a Shot, Secrets of the Clinical Trial Participant Who Inspired a Global Movement. And that will be Brianne's saga. And we'll bring her attorney in here as well, Aaron Siri. He is civil rights, informed consent, class action, high-stakes disputes. Got a lot to talk about with him and with Brianne. We'll get right to it after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for Christ's sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Joint and muscle pains are exhausting and frustrating, but I've got a over-the-counter medication I want to introduce you to that provides great relief using the power of, check it out, chili peppers. Capsidin is made with a proprietary formula that contains no non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents, no opioids, no anesthetic or steroid, nothing, no chance for addiction, no side effects. No chance it's going to interact with other medication you might be taking. Capsidin contains capsaicin, which is the substance in chili peppers that burns your tongue. That gives you that burny feeling. And of course, I've recommended capsaicin creams to patients over the years, but other capsaicin creams burn your skin. That's what makes capsidin so unique. In clinical trials, capsidin has actually been demonstrated not to burn.
I've been using capsidin to relieve my pain in my hands and my wrist from carpal tunnel syndrome and arthritis. The results have been amazing. I use it every day during my show, and I highly recommend it.
Get the pain relief you need from various sources, even backache, sprains, bruises even. Order now at capsidin.com/Drew to get a 15% discount plus free shipping. That is CAPSADYN, capsidin.com/DREW. And you can follow, let me get you the particulars where you can follow everybody we're speaking with today. Brianne Dressen on X, BRANNE, Dressen, DRESSEN. Also React19.org on X, and Aaron Siri, SIRI, yes, just like the phones. G, Aaron is AARON, Siri G, and Substack, Aaron Siri, as well as SiriLP.com, I believe. All right, so we got a lot to get into here today. Let's just get right to it. Brianne, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us the story.
You know, everything started, at the beginning of the pandemic. Just like anybody else, I was watching the news and I was really concerned about what I was seeing. I have a lot of medical professionals in my family, and hearing what was going on in the hospitals was also alarming, to say the least. So I wanted to do my part to help get everybody out of the pandemic, and I enrolled in a clinical trial with AstraZeneca here in the United States. So November 4th, 2020, I got my one and only shot, and my reaction started within an hour. And I started with this severe, strange pins and needles sensation down the same arm as my injection, and it spread to my other arm, my body, head to toe. And that same horrific pins and needles prickling sensation is with me to this day, every moment of every day. I landed in the hospital.
On the one side or down in your lower extremities?
I actually have it body wide. So it spread from one side to the other. And then it spread from my head down to my feet. And it actually moves with my heartbeat. So, and I do understand what you're saying. Yeah. So it's the first thing I feel when I wake up in the morning. It's the last thing I feel when I nod off to sleep with a bunch of meds to calm down the severe pain. So
and have you had a nerve biopsy to see if they can identify what's going on in the nerve? Go ahead.
Yes. So the first time I had a nerve biopsy done, it was at the National Institutes of Health when they flew 20 plus of us out to be studied for neurological complications to the COVID vaccines. My first neuropathy test showed very minor, minuscule levels. I just had it rechecked. So 3 years later, and it's definitely progressing and getting worse. So I've been diagnosed with post-vaccine neuropathy from the National Institutes of Health. That's been verified by several world experts, as well as dysautonomia, POTS, which is, the heart dysregulation. It's basically a neuroimmune condition where your immune system can't really help your nervous system regulate itself. And it does end up in a multi-system, cascade of syndromes, from brain fog, fatigue, pins and needles, numbness, weakness, heart rate fluctuations, food sensitivities, hair loss. It sounds an awful lot like long COVID.
Yeah. You're smiling.
Well, it's interesting because we really should be studying long COVID and post-vax syndrome or long vax, so we can actually get both of the patient populations better.
Well, there are isolated, I got to talk to your attorney about this, but there are isolated organizations out there doing so. It's just there's certainly no cohesive government-led undertaking, which leads me back to the NIH. Was this all AstraZeneca adverse events that you were on the plane with, or was it vaccine, all the vaccines that were being tested here?
I was the only patient from AstraZeneca in the trial. Everybody else was Pfizer, Moderna. There was one other person with J&J in the trial.
And when you say J&J, is that the same as AstraZeneca?
J&J is an adenoviral vector vaccine, so it's a very similar technology. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm actually confused about that, because if I understand correctly, we should probably review this, which is, this is not an mRNA vector. This is an old platform. I took the J&J vaccine, and I'll tell you my story of woe in a few minutes. But right. I did it because I thought, well, it's an old. First of all, I only need one vaccine, and that appealed to me. And secondly, it's an old vector. It's old adenovirus. It's like a flu vaccine. It's literally how we do the flu vaccine. So I thought, I'll just take that. Is it? And AstraZeneca is the J&J in Europe, right? Isn't that sort of how it worked?
Yeah. So AstraZeneca is an Oxford product. So it was the golden child in the UK. And the UK, at the very beginning of the vaccine rollout, they were telling the public, don't get the mRNA products. Just hang on for a couple more weeks. AstraZeneca's coming. This is the superior product of the UK.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And then in the US, right, they had the golden children, which was Pfizer and Moderna, the new novel mRNA technology.
It's such a crazy frame. You're absolutely right, though. It's exactly what happened. And that frame remains to this day in kind of a weird way,
Yes.
Although AstraZeneca got left. But okay, so and did you see were the vaccine injuries that were on the plane with you of a similar nature? Or there's a lot of
they were near identical. These were all neuroimmune conditions. So they checked all of us with the similar testing. They checked the coagulation of our blood. They checked the MRIs, which, just like everybody else, the MRIs looked fine. But that's when they really started looking into dysautonomia and POTS, small fiber neuropathy, EMGs with the large fiber neuropathy decay. And that's one thing that we've learned through our own research, is the significant overlap between long COVID and post-vax syndrome. They look near identical, but there is a signature, and people that are suffering with post-vaccine adverse events really do have a higher likelihood of having these longer-term neurological nerve damage type syndromes.
And you mentioned small and large. Do you have both?
I do. Yeah. My EMG came back positive on my left leg.
And again, I'm so curious about, I'm used to these dysschwannomas and these other sorts of immune-mediated polyneuropathies. You can see the immune cells attacking essentially the myelin cells. Is that what's happening in your case? Could they see that? Okay, so they could. And was there anything characteristic about the immunogenic activity? In other words, were certain cells activated, or could they tell?
It was interesting. They couldn't quite identify it early on. And because of the political dynamic going on in the United States in the summer of 2021, they actually shut down the study in the middle of it. So they were following up with every single participant weekly saying, hey, what are your symptoms doing? We've got some more updates on these tests that we've been waiting on. They were really engaging with the patients in a in a way that you would expect the government to be doing with a new novel set of diseases, right? But then, of course, OSHA mandates happened. And literally within days, our follow-up appointments to the NIH were canceled. Even our flights were canceled to go out there again. And all of a sudden, it was radio silence. So these are all questions
We'll call that disgusting. Let's just call it what it is. It's disgusting, whatever the explanation is. And up until that point, and I'll bring your attorney here in just a minute because I'm sure he's chomping at the bit to jump in here. But I want to get your story clear in my own mind because this is okay. So it's so nutty to me this part of the story that the NIH was looking after things, doing their job. Where was the FDA in this?
Funny you ask. The FDA, we plugged in with them at the end of summer of 2021. At this time, it was Peter Marks, head of biologics at the FDA.
Right.
We had several meetings with him, coordinating with him to discuss, why they're not following the rest of the world in communicating these adverse events as they emerge to the American public. As we saw in Germany and Denmark, they were doing something different, right? They gave us injured people that were advocating for other injured people. They gave us a long list of things that we should be doing to help them do their jobs. They asked us for all of the terms of neuropathy that we had identified in their VAERS system. They also did acknowledge to us that small fiber neuropathy is happening after COVID vaccination in women in particular. And I'm sure you may not know this, but small fiber neuropathy is not something that happens in young, healthy women. Small fiber neuropathy is something that happens with diabetes or men with an average onset at age 59. This shouldn't be happening in women of childbearing age. They did find that signal. They acknowledged that to us, but then they still didn't feel that it was significant enough to disclose to the public. We hammered them on MIS, which is a potentially, and it has been deadly in children and teens. We also went after them with Guillain-Barré, clotting, myocarditis that ends in death. Actually, my lawyer has read all of our communications with the FDA. But yeah, so it's been a brutal process. All I can say is we did everything humanly possible to work within the system to get them to do the right thing. And it's devastating to know what they know by working with them. And then it's also more devastating to know what they have yet to tell the public, even 4 years after the COVID vaccine rollout began.
Have you tried to make whatever you're describing there public?
Yes. So Science Magazine has actually disclosed, they've done 2 reports on our information. We, of course, just like everybody else, we tried with New York Times, we tried with Wall Street Journal, and none of them could get it to run. And so Wall Street Journal actually ran a story on the cover-up from the FDA, but as an opinion piece. So I guess it's an opinion, all of the documents that we have. But this hard block on getting the truth out, at the end of the day, all it's done is harmed people even further who were suffering with these adverse events across the country, who needed this information. And their providers, their doctors needed this information.
No kidding. So I saw Deborah Birx kind of admitted this on Face the Nation this last week, and I'm going to bring Aaron in to talk about that in just a second. But the last question to you before I bring him in here is, what do you want? What is your end game? What's your goal?
My goal is to kind of restructure how we are approaching even the word vaccine injury. But whenever people think about vaccine injury now, they think politics. This is not a political issue. This is a health condition. This is a medical
just so disgusting.
problem.
That is so, I want to vomit all over the table here. You have no idea how awful that is to hear. That's, you still feel like that these medical issues, this has been the story of COVID from the beginning, is that medication that people learned how to pronounce the name of in the morning had opinions about how those medicines should be used by the afternoon. Anyone who did that should absolutely freaking check themselves. All right, let's bring Aaron in. I want to hear I'm certain, Aaron, you've got a lot to add to this conversation. There we are. Thank you for standing by while I got Brianne's story out. Where are you taking this? What is your perception of what's happening here?
We want to get justice for Brie. And so we have filed a federal lawsuit against AstraZeneca with regards to their breach of their promises to her. Now, for most folks injured by COVID-19 vaccines, as you probably already know, unfortunately, they can only bring a claim in something called the Counter Injury Compensation Program, the CICP. Mm-hmm. And that's because there's a law called the PrEP Act, and there's been a lot of discussion about that has given the COVID vaccine manufacturers immunity for liability for the injuries caused by their product, because they're considered a COVID countermeasure. That's true of many of the measures that were implemented in medicine to, treat, prevent, and so forth, COVID-19. So, but in Brie's case, unlike the case of almost everybody else in the country, AstraZeneca signed an agreement with her. And in that agreement, they made promises to her as a participant in the clinical trial, and they didn't uphold those promises. So we were able to bring a lawsuit for her in federal court, and we hope to get justice for her and hold AstraZeneca accountable. Now we like to hold these pharmaceutical companies accountable for everybody that's injured. That's the way it's supposed to work. The reason that cars, planes, drugs, almost every product out there is safer is because the companies have an economic interest to assure its safety. They want to make money, and if they have to pay for harms, all right, then they'll assure the safety because they don't want to get upside down. But when it comes to these products, unfortunately, they can't be held accountable directly.
Yeah.
In this one instance, we hope to do so.
What about, is the cost, I imagine the damages are going to be the cost of all the medical care that she's having to get. Was that when she was being cared for by the NIH, was that being covered? And if so, why aren't we holding the government responsible for withholding the care that she also deserved? Or is that going to be a separate lawsuit?
I would love to be able to bring that lawsuit if there was a law that allowed me to do so. The federal government, you typically can only sue if they have waived immunity. The federal government, if they've waived immunity and allowed you to sue them. And so for sure, I would love to. Look, when you think about it, what are the two ways we assure product safety? And at the end of the day, I just want to assure everybody, vaccines are just products. They're products like any other, right? There's nothing really special per se. They're a product. They have a safety and efficacy profile, and there's a reality to that. And unlike every other product, we assure their safety by the fact that the company, as I mentioned before, has an economic interest. There's a second way we assure safety, and it's far weaker. It's not as effective, but it's regulators. They serve a role, but they're never as effective. You think cars in America are safer because of regulators? Or do you think it's because of class action lawyers who sue them whenever they had a problem? Look at other countries where you can't bring those kinds of lawsuits and look at the safety profile of products there. And you can see very clearly economic forces work. With that said, there's no economic forces assuring their safety. And then when it comes to the regulator, to answer your question, I know I took a long road, but when it comes to the regulators, they're hopelessly conflicted. On the one hand, they have to promote these products. And on the other hand, they have to assure their safety. And those two things come into tension. And they're not separated. When it comes, for example, to the Department of Transportation that has to promote transportation, they separate that from the NTSB that assures safety, or the Department of Energy that promotes nuclear power plants. They separate that from the regulatory function of assuring the safety of nuclear power plants. When it comes to vaccines, the product we inject into adults and often into children, which all have immunity, by the way, not just COVID vaccines, all vaccines are the National Childhood Vaccine Drug 1986. Regulators are hopelessly conflicted because they serve that dual role, and they're the entity that you do bring a claim if you have one against. And so if they do any safety studies that show the vaccine causes any issues, lawyers will use it against the government to establish liability in the CICP for COVID vaccine, and in something called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program for almost all other vaccines.
Yeah, and Dr. Fryman pointed out to us that the way they determine at the FDA if the vaccine has caused an adverse event, they got a guy. They just sent out a guy. Imagine if they had done that with Vioxx. Do you think that caused a heart attack? Nah, I don't think so. I mean, these are unprovable things. They are there, and you look at them, and you can't have a guy look at them on a case-by-case basis and determine anything. And by the way, in the rolling into this interview, we played a tape of Dr. Fryman. And that interview, we heard from Dr. Marks, who was given a report on that phone call about an 8-year-old who died within a day of the vaccine, or he fell ill within a day of the vaccine and died a few days later. And he said, wow, we haven't heard that report yet. I guess it fell through the cracks. And Fryman's like, that should have been a holy shit moment. What do you mean it just fell through the cracks? An 8-year-old died, and you're like, I guess our system isn't as good as we thought it was. So what is it, Aaron, you hope to achieve, and are you contemplating a class action with this?
Well, I would love to bring a class action on behalf of everybody that's been injured by a COVID-19 vaccine. We should have those against Pfizer, against Moderna, against J&J, against AstraZeneca, for everybody injured, because that's the way it's supposed to work. But you can't, because of the PrEP Act immunity, I can't bring that suit. Bree is in a unique situation because she was in a clinical trial, and AstraZeneca and her signed an agreement, a written agreement in which they promised certain things to her, like to pay her medical expenses and so forth, and didn't uphold that. I can bring a claim against them for breach of contract. Normally what you do when you have injured by a product is you bring a claim for something called the design defect claim. You say, well, you could have made the product safer, or failure to warrant claims, right? But those claims, the PrEP Act provides immunity for. So unfortunately, at the moment, I will say we do have 2 lawsuits pending right now in which we are seeking to strike down the PrEP Act immunity as unconstitutional. That's one way that class action lawsuits could potentially happen, assuming that if that occurs, that Congress doesn't then put the COVID vaccine injuries into the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, which was a program set up in 1980 as a result of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. I can explain what that is if you'd like in about 1 or 2 minutes.
In a second, though, I just want to ask one further question about Bree's situation and get her comment too. Why is this taking so long? It seems like a breach of it's in the contract. They violated the contract. What's the problem? Why does this even have to? Can't this be settled very, very easily and quickly?
Is that for me?
Oh, sure. Go ahead. I'll give Bree a chance.
I'll give you the answer to that, because Bree's a good person. She's a good person, and she kept trying to work with them, engage with them, give them every single opportunity to do the right thing. Frankly, she went above and beyond what I think most folks would have done in terms of being patient, reasonable, and just, she's just a good person. And so, that process played itself out over a period of time. And eventually, when they would not agree to do the right thing, we brought a federal lawsuit.
And Bree, what was the issue? Why the contract was the contract, the cost was the cost. Was there a time frame issue, or what was it they were claiming?
They were claiming nothing. The sad reality is as soon as I was injured, they couldn't get away from me fast enough. There were 2 times that I heard from them for any kind of amount of money. And, at that point, it wasn't about money. I was trying to get some answers to what was going on in my body, but they wouldn't respond to anything. And they both, the 2 times they responded were because reporters came after them. And they offered me $590 for the first time.
Hey, perfect. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It can pay for maybe 1/10 of a ER visit. And we actually told them, no, don't send us that money. Go back and look at our records and try again. And they wired the money to us anyway. And we didn't hear from them again until another reporter hit them up. And the second settlement letter was for $1,200. They're not taking this seriously. And
clearly not. Is it because they're a British company? Is it that they could have they're not used to this kind of a attack, or what's going on?
That's a really good question. I would hope that at one point we can get one of them to just answer that in an honest fashion. I guess that's one benefit of a lawsuit, is hopefully that will force them to actually take this seriously and answer those questions that not just me injured in the clinical trial, but their other participants would like to know those, and we all enlisted in the fight against COVID together to help the greater good. I had no idea when I enrolled in this scientific experiment that I was actually enlisting in a corporate propaganda machine. I thought I was enlisting in a objective, active scientific process. And they did agree to help me if there was a problem, and they didn't.
Well, I'm sure you understood there were risks of this thing when you're a guinea pig, quite literally. But it sounds like when the NIH was doing their job, you were okay. They're taking care of me. What are you going to do? And then when they begged out, and then the trouble ensued, that's I think where things went off the rail a little bit. But I got to take a little break here. Aaron Siri SG on X, and Aaron Siri SIRI on Substack. And is it Siri LP? Am I getting that right, Aaron?
It's SiriLLP.com. That's my law.
LLP. There's 2 L's. Okay, yes. That's my aging eyes. Brianne Dressen, BRIANNEDRESSEN on X, and React19.org on X. And we're going to take a little break. Meryl Nass joins us in about 20 minutes or so, but hang tight. We got more to talk to on Aaron and Bree, and I'm going to look at what you guys are talking about on the rant and the restream. See if you have any questions for Brianne, go ahead and put them there. I'll be back in just a minute. The Wellness Company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/TWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there. I want to teach you about pharmacogenomic testing. This is changing the way we approach healthcare. By analyzing a patient's genetic profile, pharmacogenomics helps physicians personalize drug treatments for more effective results. First, it enhances medication efficacy by predicting how a patient will respond to a specific drug, reducing the trial and error process, especially in mental health care. For example, it can guide the choice of various medications to minimize side effects and improve outcomes. In the long run, pharmacogenomic testing leads to cost savings. It shortens the time to find the right treatment and avoids expensive side effects. It also supports more personalized care, helping physicians make better decisions and ensuring that treatments are tailored to each individual's unique genetic makeup. Test simply requires you to swab your cheek, then you send in the sample to our lab. Discover the power of personalized medicine with pharmacogenomic testing. Tailor your treatments based on your unique genetic makeup. Reduce trial and error, avoid side effects, find the most effective medication for you. Take control of your health today. Go to drdrew.com/checkgenetics. That is drdrew.com/checkgenetics. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue, and we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15.
Dr. Drew said the best way to quit drinking is by going cold turkey, and he's a doctor, so why would you question doctors?
Dr. Drew called me unfixable.
And we've got some new news from Paleo Valley. New variety of the grass-fed and finished bone broth in town. It's a fast becoming a favorite here. It is the salted caramel, like the chocolate, vanilla, and unflavored. It's made from bones, not hides. It's an amazing source of collagen protein, low in calories. Susan and I literally use it every morning, and this is a great new addition to their product line. Satisfying, it's great ways, and it helps you control your appetite. So maybe you won't overeat this season. Certainly put it in your coffee at the end of a meal and you'll be done. If you have recipe ideas for the new salted caramel, share them. Go to drdrew.com/contact and select Paleo Valley ideas from the drop-down menu. Stock up now for the holidays at drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order or 20% off when you subscribe. We are speaking with Brianne Dressen. She was vaccine injured in the AstraZeneca clinical trials for the vaccine development, and Aaron Siri, who is her attorney. Please welcome them back. You can follow Brianne on X, Brianne Dressen, Dressen, and Aaron is Aaron Siri SG on X. Aaron, informed consent. I understand that's an area of interest for you. I don't know if you noticed, I was looking desperately for the transcript, which I had, of Deborah Birx this weekend on Face the Nation, where she essentially said, we didn't do a good enough job of telling people what the vaccine, I think the quote was, did and did not do. That to me is an explicit repudiation of the ability, first of all, that they did give informed consent, and given how obfuscating the information flow has been, even if we had attempted to, and as she admitted, they did not tell people what it did and not do. But let's say we did attempt, they did not give us the information in order to do it. And this has been a grave concern of mine from the beginning. When patient asks me what the risks are, particularly now with the boosters, I'm like, I have no idea. That we have no idea, because the variant that we're boosting for, you're taking the booster for a variant that existed 8 months ago. So what the hell are we doing? Aaron, go ahead.
Well, the way that we've got 40 folks at our firm that just do vaccine-related work. I believe we have the largest vaccine practice in the world that doesn't represent pharmaceutical companies. 15 of those folks do vaccine injury claims. We don't sue pharmaceutical companies typically. We just sue in that program, and we sue the federal government in a program called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. That's a very limited program and will compensate very limited things. But when we do that, we want to assess, right, the safety and efficacy of the product, particularly obviously the safety. We want to see if a mother calls you and says, look, I gave my 2-month-old Hep B shot or a few vaccines, and then ended up with a grand mal seizure within 10 minutes. Well, how do we determine causation? How can we show whether the vaccine caused that issue? Well, then normally the way you do it is you have a prospective trial that compares a exposed group to an unexposed group. It's commonly known as a clinical trial.
No. Yes, other medication, that's what you would do, or medical products or medical devices, you would just do that.
You would just do that. And so with COVID vaccine, to your example, if somebody asked you, Dr. Drew, like you were saying, well, should I give them the booster? You'd want to look at the clinical trial data for that vaccine. Well, good luck finding it because it doesn't exist for most of the boosters. They're not using clinical trials. And unfortunately, the reality is that there's a giant delta between the clinical trials for vaccines and the clinical trials for drugs. When it comes to drugs, if I may, most package inserts, if you pull up that piece of paper in the box, when you get the drug, there's that big piece of paper. You open it up, you go to section 6.1, and as required by federal law, it will summarize what was the clinical trial vis-a-vis safety relied upon to license that product. Well, for many drugs, like look at the top-selling Pfizer drugs, Enbrel, Lyriquis, Lipitor, you will see they're multi-year clinical trials that review safety against the placebo. So you can compare those that are exposed, not exposed, and you can look at all the body systems, neurological system, the immune system, cardiovascular system. You can see the delta between those. But with vaccines, you don't have that. And by the way, don't take my word for it. It's all on the FDA website. You can go to FDA, licensed vaccines, and on one page you can look at the clinical trials to license most vaccines. Unfortunately, you don't have that data. So you don't have it for the booster. For the initial COVID vaccine product, at least for Pfizer and Moderna, you do have at least 2 months on average of placebo control data. But I'll tell you, that's and 6 months of safety for approximately for rare events. But that's an aberration. That is rare. You're not going to find that for virtually any clinical trial for vaccines. You will find it for drugs.
Yeah. Of course. And not only that, but when you look at, say, the Pfizer trials that they did do initially during that whole ramp up to bringing the vaccine out, if I remember correctly, you tell me if this is so, they excluded people that were lost to follow-up for the 2-week window after the vaccine was administered, which is the window during which the highest acuity is likely to develop, meaning that that's when people drop dead. And those people were just, not in the trial. What are we going to do? We just lost them to follow-up. Let's move on, right? Am I wrong or am I right?
Yeah, there were problems in the manner that you're describing, but may I one-up you? And it's this.
Go ahead.
They said it's 95% effective. What was that based on?
Oh, yeah.
It was based on the fact that about 100 and something individuals in the and this was for Pfizer initially, 100 and something individuals had some symptoms consistent with COVID-19 and they tested positive. Oh. And I forgot what it was a single digit of individuals in the vaccinated group, in the exposed group, had some symptoms. And they said, therefore, that it's 95% effective. That wasn't measuring, when they gave it emergency use authorization, that wasn't measuring death, hospitalization, or severe outcomes. It was just measuring those symptoms. And, we brought the lawsuit that got against the FDA when they wanted to hide the data for 75 years, and we've gotten a lot of that data now, not all of it, to license the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. And when you look at that data, what you see is that there were hundreds and hundreds of individuals who had some symptoms consistent maybe with COVID, but were not tested. So how do you know that those who were tested were not cherry-picked, were not an aberration? They were telling every single American to test almost daily, but yet they couldn't just test everybody in this clinical trial, you're telling me? Really? And had they done that, by the way, just once a week tested everybody, the 30 to 42,000 individuals, depending on the trial, you would have also known whether or not it prevented transmission, but they didn't do that. I'll add one last point, if I may, and it's this. While they did a statistical comparison with regards to the efficacy, that 95%, when it came to deaths, that's not what they did. There were over 20 deaths in the...
Yeah, they didn't look at deaths at all, if I remember right. They didn't look at deaths at all.
No, they did. You can go read
it was in the study, but they didn't use it as an endpoint, if I remember right, no?
Well, the severe outcomes was an endpoint. Death is a severe outcome. So it would certainly have been On the safety front, it measured serious adverse events. If you go to the FDA definition of serious adverse event, it has a list. It's the defined term for the clinical trial. Death is one of them. So it did look at deaths as a safety outcome. And in that regard, if you look at all-cause death mortality in the trials, there were 21, I believe, deaths in the vaccinated group for the Pfizer trial, and around 15 deaths in the placebo group. But did they do a statistical comparison? By the way, this, again, not me. This is in the FDA documentation. You can pull it up yourself. It's on the FDA website in the summary documentation. But did they do a comparison, statistical comparison? No. Instead, they let Pfizer explain away each death individually and say, well, none of them were related to the vaccine or to the placebo.
Aaron, they got a guy. They got a guy goes out and looks at it. The guy looks at it. The guy. I'd love to talk to that guy sometime. There are probably a few guys like that.
On your show. The guy is Peter Marks.
I've heard. No, he isn't. No, he isn't. He sends a guy out to look at it and reports to him. But they got a guy. So that's how they do it. So yeah, there's a mess. So when you look at all this, and Brianne, I'm going to give you a chance once I finish with Aaron here. I'm sorry to keep you sort of silently listening to all this, but what has gone wrong? What's going on? Is it the PrEP Act? Is it when you lie in bed and I think, how are we going to fix this? What do you imagine?
Here's how we fix it. We just treat vaccines like every other product. I mentioned before Pfizer's other drug products, right? Why do they do multi-year placebo-controlled trials? Because they want to know the safety, Dr. Drew, before it goes on the market. Because if they put a drug on the market and it hurts 100,000 people, they're on the hook. They don't want to end up financially upside down. It's not nefarious. It's just good business. They're there to make money. They're there to make money for their shareholders. And so if vaccines were under that same economic regime, they would do the proper trials because they want to know, not the FDA. But with vaccines, they're not on the hook. I'm going to say something incredible, but your viewers will have to check it themselves, okay? The very first vaccine they give on the first day of life, hepatitis B, there's only two, Recombavax HB and Engerix-B. There's only two hepatitis B vaccines on the market for a newborn. First vaccine on the CDC schedule. I urge all your viewers, go to the FDA website, pull up the package insert for Recombavax HB, go to section 6.1, and you will see that the FDA licensed that product to be injected into millions of babies on a clinical trial that had 147 children and 5 days of safety monitoring. And there's no control, forget placebo, in that trial. That trial is useless for assessing safety. In a normal product, if it was a drug, no drug company would want to put that product on the market if they were on the hook for injuries.
No.
But for this product, you can. And I don't know if you can share your screen. I mean, a great exercise. You can fact check me right now. Go to the FDA website right now. You could pull it up if you want to. I mean, it's a great exercise. I'm happy to share my screen.
Which subcategory? Say it again. Which hepatitis B vaccine is that?
Yeah, so go. It's Recombavax HB. So if you just go to Google.
Okay, hold on a second. Recombavax HB, Caleb, and then which subsection? 6.1. Is that what you said?
That's right.
6.1.
So if you pull it up now. So to answer your question, how do you fix it? So here's how you fix it. Lift the immunity to liability, so these companies can be held accountable, just like every other company. You want to tell me that these products? I'll give you these hepatitis B vaccines have been on the market now for decades. You want to tell me 30 years later, you still don't know it's safe enough to lift the immunity? Really? You still can't do it? Or even COVID vaccine. 4 years they've been telling us it's safe, completely safe. Great. Then why don't you put your money where your mouth is and lift the liability? The fact that they will not lift the liability on any of these vaccines belies their claims of safety.
Yeah, I'm afraid that is probably so. There it is. Is that the reference, Aaron?
Is this the one?
Under
it's
6.1, second paragraph,
Yeah.
read the very first sentence.
In 3 clinical studies, 434 doses of the vaccine 5 mcg were administered to 147 healthy infants and children up to 10 years of age who were monitored for 5 days after each dose.
Now, I can assure you the first time I read that, Dr. Drew, I said it couldn't be. It cannot be. That's incredible. How could the FDA do this? So we FOIA'd the FDA and we demanded the underlying clinical trials. We got them. And I can assure you it's 5 days. And those clinical trials, if you go to ICANDecide.org, that's the nonprofit that funds us to do a lot of this work. We posted all of them there. We've done that for many vaccines. You can read the underlying clinical trial reports. It's 5 days of safety monitoring after each dose. That's all there's. We even sued the FDA and said, come on, there's got to be more than this, give it to us. And they've never given us anything. We've also petitioned the FDA in the same formal petitioning docket that, let's say, Pfizer and Moderna uses to license. We've petitioned them to either withdraw this product or require a proper clinical trial. They're supposed to respond in 6 months. It's been 3.5 years, and they keep delaying us and not responding because they don't have anything. That's the concern, Dr. True. The way you fix this is, one, restore market forces to these products so they're treated like any other, and two, you got to unconflict the regulators by separating the promotion function with regards to vaccines and the safety function with regards to vaccines.
Yes, I completely agree with you on that. It's all, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I hope they would have some sort of exception in a dire emergency where they could move things to market quickly, but not mandate them. You know what I mean? The mandating is where they got into trouble with me. But, I thought that what they brought to market in the middle of a crisis was, okay, good. But then the mandates, and then it wasn't clear what we were doing. That's what they just jumped off the rail completely. All right. Well, listen, Aaron, I'm going to bring Bree back, but I thank you for being here and thank you for the work. And I hope you'll update us sometime in the near future.
Happy to.
You got it. And Brianne, I want you to close us out on this topic with where you're going, what you're doing with other vaccine-injured individuals. What do you want people to know about your project?
Well, through fighting with the NIH, fighting with the FDA, fighting with all of the drug companies, we learned really quickly that they were not going to help us. So we started our own registered 501c3 nonprofit, react19.org. We currently represent 36,000 COVID vaccine injured Americans. We have a partnership with over 20 other COVID vaccine injury organizations globally. The purpose of this organization is to provide financial, physical, and emotional support for people that are suffering these severe adverse events. Because just like they're not getting adequate medical care. They're getting no compensation from the government. And they also are completely left abandoned. And emotionally, it's been a really big struggle for a lot of our members. Our partner organization did a survey.
I've seen it. They all were marginalized, led to feel guilty for being sick, essentially. It's so wild. Keep going. Finish up here. Yeah.
Well, and this is something that you understand better than most, is that kind of psychological attack on people that are suffering, that are really just trying to hang on to the day-to-day, is a very dangerous situation. So our partner organization did a survey and asked their injured membership, how many of you have considered suicide during the duration of your illness? The answer came back with, it came back with over 70%. So
that makes sense.
As far as we're concerned, 70% of people who self-report that they're having severe COVID vaccine injuries are having a life or death decision because of the severe circumstances they land. So this is why we do feel that this is a crisis. And it's something that the government does need to address. And we are expecting the Trump administration to really dig into this, to address these issues, long COVID issues, chronic fatigue syndrome issues. These are the patients that just continue to be abandoned. But in the meantime, it's independent organizations, people like yourself, that are really propelling this conversation to be something that is not political, but making this a human issue, right? And so that's why through our organization, we have provided medical grants for over $890,000 to date to people that are suffering severe adverse events. We're a volunteer organization. We do this because we understand the substantial needs of this population. So if there's anyone out there that feels, inspired to jump in with this grassroots activation, and really help their fellow man, we're a good place to start.
Last question is just sort of to wrap this up. Is it not odd that this has become your life? And I'm wondering what you were doing before.
This was not on my bingo card. Let's just say that.
So odd.
I was just an everyday, preschool teacher, retired project manager, just living my life, being a good citizen, teaching my kids how to take care of others around them. And now this has turned into this crazy, firestorm that I never would have expected. But at the end of the day, I really appreciate the fact that I see things crystal clear now. I see what the media does.
Mm-hmm.
I see what the corporations do.
Isn't
I see
it
what
crazy?
The government does.
Is it not crazy? COVID did us this favor of laying bare, the things that we didn't know. But it's in a way we've just been swimming in it like a fish swim in water, and we found out what the water was. And here it is, and it was weirdly laid bare. I'm still amazed at what I've learned. But okay, give us the website one more time, and then I'm going to let you go and get Dr. Nass here to give us an update. Great.
So react19.org, and you can hop on Amazon and buy this book if you would like. 100% of the proceeds go to the nonprofit. We're not pocketing any of the money. This is a non-confrontational narrative that you actually can give to your family members if you would like them to just start considering what could really have been going on during the COVID pandemic. It really is bringing out the human aspect of this side, because we've all just been hammered with the political narrative, and now it's time for us to take a step back, have a disarming conversation and really start looking at this logically. So you can pick that up on Amazon if you want.
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Bree, and good luck with everything, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you.
You got it. Now we're going to bring our friend Dr. Meryl Nass back in here. She's the founder of doortofreedom.org. She has been writing on Substack. It's merylnass.substack.com. And again, she's been one of our favorite guests, and she has some interesting updates for us. Meryl, welcome back to the program. I think you might be muted on your end. Try it again. There we go. We got you back. You're good.
Okay. Yes. Very glad to be here again.
So I'm guess that must have been interesting for you to sit and listen to some of that story. It's again, I'm sure also not new information or shocking to you. What do you got for us today?
Well, I know Bree. Bree has done something that no one else has done in the chronic fatigue community or vaccine injury community, which is that basically she's gone everywhere, she's done everything, and she's created an organization for people and is actually finding ways to help them and to keep them connected with each other, which is crucially important. All of the symptoms, this is going to be strange for people to hear, but all the symptoms Bree listed that she was experiencing were symptoms or syndromes that people who got anthrax vaccine and got sick had. So POTS, chronic fatigue syndrome, hair loss, small fiber neuropathy, everything else she said. And it's very interesting. That should be studied. Of course, nobody studied it for anthrax vaccine, and if it wasn't for people like Bree, nobody would be studying it now. In fact, NIH had $1 billion to spend studying long COVID, and they blew $1 billion, and they got zilch.
Wow. They spend it on. Hard to know. Do you have a theory? I guess it's almost impossible to theorize about this, But I wonder if you do have a theory about what has been activated in the immune system that causes this attack. I had thought that this was something about the spike protein, because that, in my experience, it's the people that produce a lot of spike and a lot of spike antibody. Those are the ones that tend to get these adverse reactions. This whole story with Breeze does not really suggest that. Do you have a theory what physiologically is going on here?
So, no, I don't have an overarching theory, but because people became sensitive, many people, and not only anthrax vaccine injured, but people with Gulf War syndrome, it's been reported in a bunch of papers, developed food sensitivity, chemical, odor sensitivity, and sometimes sensitivity to molds or even electromagnetic fields. So I would say that could probably only happen if some factor in our bodies that's modulating our experience and deciding, what we should react to and what we shouldn't react to has gone awry.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and whether
it's a dysregulation. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Whether that applies to the other symptoms, I can't say.
Yeah, I would hope that with, when you have explicit pathology like, immune attack on a medium-sized nerve or a small nerve fiber, you can look at what cells are there. You can do the staining. Maybe you could even figure out what they're binding to, what they're attacking. But as you said, they had $1 billion to study that and didn't. And it's terrible. What a missed opportunity. They had Bree and cases like hers in their midst and were following them appropriately and doing what I would call good care, and just jump ship all of a sudden in the middle, which is nothing short of reprehensible. Uh-oh, we lost your sound again. Hang on a second, Meryl.
Yeah.
There we are. You're back. Go ahead.
Okay. One thing that
again,
doesn't fit with the internal medicine model is a concept that a lot of alternative doctors use, which is simply overload. And I think that may be a reasonable hypothesis. So if you're producing a lot of spike protein, right, you may be overloading that way. With anthrax vaccine, it was a very dirty vaccine, had loads of different antigenic bits in it because it wasn't cleaned up. So there was protein, DNA, RNA, everything you can, carbohydrates,
I get what you're saying, but I'm gonna avoid, because it's really the same thing as, let me just, before I say what I'm going to say I've got plastic surgeon friends who always say we can only do so much surgery because if we do more, the patients just die. There's an overload. They just die. We don't know why die. They just die. And you're sort of saying the same thing in this case too, not with death being necessarily the outcome, but it is. I'm laughing because unfortunately, we can't stop with this. What we're saying here is they're blowing a fuse. The fuse gets blown. Its system is overloaded. They blow a fuse. But we need more. We need more than that. We can't just say that.
Well, people with chemical exposure. So people who worked in the EPA building that was a sick building in Washington. It was a very tight building. A lot of people became chemically sensitive and developed various syndromes. This is over 20 years ago. Because they were breathing in or exposed to, too much junk. There's so much, stuff that comes off the polyurethane, off gases from the paint, off gases from so many potential building materials. So, and then there's people who live in homes that have a lot of mold exposure, and certain molds will do it to them. So it fits with an overload hypothesis, whatever that turns out to be, because we don't know what regulates. We don't know which cells, but we could find out. We could probably use animal models.
We could, of course, and I would argue that I thought we were going to get at it a little bit during COVID with the cytokine activation thing. That CCR5 system, to me, seemed like the zone where things were going off the rail. And it might be the same zone that's on a lower level activation is going off the rail with the fuse blowing of too much spike protein or something. I don't know, because the CCR5 is an amplifier system. And I don't know. It just makes sense that there might be something going on there. And there were some meds in the midst of COVID, people have already forgotten about these days, that were sort of directed at that system and were having some effect.
Yeah. And it may be because we're using up too much of certain substances, more than we can make. Deal with it, right? Or we're using up, vitamins as cofactors. Because some people, some people do improve
system
with CoQ10 or B12 or whatever.
Interesting. So as you look at things now, and with RFK Jr. coming in and this sort of a new world order, I guess, what do you imagine is going to happen as we proceed?
Well, I think what we saw with these 6 missiles launched from Ukraine that required U.S. Targeting right into a depot of a weapons depot in Russia. What we're seeing is the deep state is doing everything possible to create as much chaos, to either leave the Trump administration with as many problems as possible, or perhaps to even get into a war that would stop the administration from changing. We're in a very dangerous period now until January 20th.
And without sort of leaning into that dire sort of phenomenology that's underway, let's say that settles down. Any predictions on RFK Jr. and his action? He said he's going to take a RICO look at major journals, at medical societies, which was new for me to hear him talking about medical societies and the pharma companies. What do you expect him to do? Or do you have any idea? Yeah.
Well, RFK was looking into a RICO case once before, that 3 years ago, that I was involved with. So so a RICO case is a very special case because you get triple damages. So lawyers, can afford to invest in it. And it's something that attorney generals can take on, so that they can sue because they were required to pay some of the Medicaid costs of people who were injured by, bad vaccines or bad drugs like remdesivir. What happened during COVID was, in my own experience, unique, had never happened before, which is the medical journals linked arms and wouldn't publish articles that were critical of, say, the vaccine, and published articles that were obviously fraudulent. And of course, I'm talking about the May 22nd, 2020 article in The Lancet, which claimed that it had data on 90,000 people from 6 continents in real time. And just think about that. That were all hospitalized, and about 15 or 20,000 were given chloroquine drugs, hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, and it claimed that the death rate was higher in those who had received a chloroquine drug compared to everybody else. So that was the study. It got worldwide attention. I was driving home and I heard it on the radio. So everybody was talking about it. It turned out that it was all fabricated, but of course it was fabricated. I knew the minute I read it, which was that evening, because there are no databases that have all those hospitals' data in many languages in real time. Nobody has access. And if you did have access, it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So it was clearly fraudulent. Now, if I could figure that out in 5 minutes, why couldn't the Lancet editors, why couldn't the peer reviewers? No one had ever heard of such a database before. And it turned out it was a company with 5 employees. So, it was
that
ridiculous.
Was essentially a porn company or something, right? It wasn't even a data company, or it was it had been a porn company that used data to. Yeah, but this is the point: is that this was the hysteria that was going on, and part of that hysteria was the unwillingness to be objective and to do science. Completely.
Yes.
Just shut down.
Right. And the Lancet, has had a series of articles that are questionable. They eventually did admit that this one was fabricated. The editor-in-chief,
Yep.
Richard Horton, admitted that. But the journals have, refused to publish other good papers or retracted papers that got published when they were politically incorrect. And the specialty boards, as you know, went after and took away the board certification of Dr. Merrick and Dr. Corey. And when I looked up the board, I looked myself up when that happened to them and found that mine had been removed. I no longer had a board, and they hadn't even contacted me. So who knows how many other people now.
Well, I got to say, I was on the American College of Physicians website checking to see if I'd paid my bill, which is largely what you do for these societies. And I noticed I was back to member. I'd been a fellow for a decade and a half. And I'm wondering if that's a real thing or not. I didn't want to ask because they didn't notify me. So I'm going to still say I'm a fellow until they notify me otherwise. Just interesting, right?
It is interesting. Well, when you look into the board, you see the fellow who was the head has just recently retired a few months ago. What was his name? Richard Barron. And he was also the head of the foundation for the American Board of Internal Medicine, and he was earning over $1 million a year with that gig.
Of course.
And he had published a paper and talked on a New England Journal podcast about how difficult, they asked him, well, how do you figure out what's misinformation and what isn't misinformation? And he dodged. He said, well, if a doctor tells somebody to go get treated with magnets for cancer, well, that's misinformation. But he wouldn't draw a line or give a definition, which is what in my case, when I took, when I went before the medical board in Maine, they would not say what I had what specific thing I said that was misinformation, nor would they define what misinformation was. So, the board of Internal Medicine knew they were skating on thin ice, but decided to, cross a line and take away people's board certifications, on the basis of this misinformation thing, which they didn't define. And I would say that they were, just like the case of Brianne, they breached a contract. We had an implied contract with them, right? We did our residency, we took our test, we paid our dues, and that was the deal. They give us the board certification when we've gone through those hoops. And just to take it away like that, it's not written down anywhere how they can do that. They're allowed to do it if you've done something terrible, but if they don't even specify what it is you've done, they can't do it, but they did it anyway. So there's a lot of illegal things that have gone on, and it seems that there was some kind of collusion because several boards were doing the same thing. The pediatrics board and the OBGYN board was doing the same thing. And many of the journals were doing the same thing. So, and somebody must have told them to do it, and presumably money changed hands. Something changed hands. So I think a RICO case is very reasonable, and it's a way to get to the bottom of what exactly happened.
I just remember the one article that Dr. Menike, the Danish physician, the article about the lot, the vaccine lots having many more side effects, or 90% of the side effects. It was such a great little study. She couldn't get it published for 2 years. That's that to me, that's the smoking gun. There's a few things that have happened during this thing that were just poster child events. What they did to you, the Board of Internal Medicine did to you, what they did to Jay Bhattacharya in terms of the devastating takedown, what they did to her and her article in terms of not publishing it. These were sentinel events that tell you how off the rail we were. Dr. Nass, is there anything else?
Go on. Dr. Nass, a job in the government.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah. Well, we'll see how that goes. I mean, I hope she turns up somewhere, but you're going to have to get Dr. Oz's participation in what you were looking for in terms of the Medicaid expenses for the vaccines and whatnot. But We can go. I'll go with you to talk to him if you want to. I'd be happy to talk to that man. So appreciate you being here as always. Is there anything else before I wrap things up?
I was going to answer a question you had posed earlier, which is that the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines were both using the adenovirus as a vector. We're both double-stranded DNA, but they were made by two different companies.
But they were almost identical, right? I had a terrible reaction to the J&J.
Moderna versus Pfizer. Now, most of the doses for both of them. So AstraZeneca was never given an EUA or a license in the United States.
That's right.
The company that used to make, it still does, make anthrax vaccine, a very crooked company, had contracts to make AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. And they mixed them up. They contaminated their ingredients, and they had to throw away the ingredients for about 400 million doses of those vaccines. So there, and they no longer were the contract was taken away, so they couldn't make them anymore. But there was only a relatively small number of the J&J that were used in the United States.
And it's interesting, and I had that reaction that was so dread. I was the only male I'm aware of that had it, like low-level TTP. There's my eye, my raccoon eye that I woke up with the day after the vaccine, which is the presenting manifestation of a transverse sinus thrombosis, which evidently I was forming, and thankfully I had no neurological symptoms, and it went away. But who knows? Maybe I still have a clot up there. I mean, who knows? You know what I mean? I felt fine. I continued to feel fine, but. Yes, that was good times, and when I took that vaccine,
before anyone had
COVID.
Announced that cavernous sinus thrombosis was a side effect.
The TTP, there had been 3 cases of TTP at that, was thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura at that point. And then after I had this, or around the same time I had this, it was all in women. I looked in the mirror and I thought, oh my God, I'm the only man that's going to have had this reaction. But they were starting to talk about the transverse sinus thrombosis as a complication of the TTP. Like a few days before I took the vaccine, instantly I had a chill through my whole body. And it was so odd. I thought to myself, how am I having, I feel like I'm reacting, every inch of my system is reacting. It's weird. And then I got sick.
Morning.
Wait, Drew, did you have that tingling? Did you have that tingling feeling that Brianne was describing, like the electrical shock?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. It was a very odd chill. It's not the kind of chill you get from a fever or something. It was just an odd, it felt like something was coursing through my body, but I did not get neuropathic symptoms at all. It just was this weird systemic reaction. And I just sat there thinking, how did it get, is it actually distributing throughout the body that quick? It's just not possible. What's going on here? Anyway.
That raises another question. So vaccinators were instructed not to withdraw the syringe to see whether they were in a blood vessel or not.
I know. I thought about that too, but they put it in the right spot. I don't really have veins in that part of my shoulder. It couldn't have been that. Well, who knows? We don't. But you're right. They didn't draw back, or maybe she did. She might have actually drawn back. She might have. I think she did. Actually, now that I think about it. So there was no blood return or anything in the vaccine administrator. But in any event, and then I guess I'd had COVID, if I remember. That was after COVID, Susan, because we were going to go travel. I didn't feel I needed it. I didn't feel I needed it.
New York and have dinner outside.
Right, exactly. And I was like, screw this. I don't want 2 shots. I'll just take the 1, and boom. But in any event, and it's funny, we had, there's a University of San Francisco Gandhi, Monica Gandhi, is that her name?
Yes.
Had her on during a week later, and I'm Monica. I'm like, should I take an aspirin? Should I not take an aspirin? Because there was also people getting bleeding because of the consumptive coagulopathy. So I was like, she was like, oh, don't take the aspirin because I seem to have resolved at that point.
Say that again. Electric never mind.
Which is this?
That word, whatever it was you used.
The transverse sinus thrombosis?
No, the collective
coagulopathy.
Thrombotic. Oh, the consumptive coagulopathy. It was a consumptive, TTP is a consumptive coagulopathy. There's fancy words for Meryl and I. All right. Well, listen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Next year in Washington or whatever, next month maybe. Who knows how long it'll be. But I do think you're going to need Dr. Oz's attention for some of this stuff, and of course RFK Jr. So there may be some pilgrimages, and if I can be of any use, please do let me know. We want to just get things straight. We want to make America healthier. That's it. Make things better.
Though, to be the Surgeon
No,
General.
I do not want to be the Surgeon General.
Meryl.
Oh, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I know. I feel like she does. Like, what are you wishing on us? Okay. Dr. Nass, thank you so much. Follow her on X, Nass Meryl, Meryl. Thank you so much for being here again, as always.
Hey, thank you. Bye-bye now.
God bless.
Thank you. All righty. So let's get the upcoming guest list up on the board here. We got a lot of stuff coming. And of course, as you see, these guests are always exceptional and great and wonderful source of information. And just we try to expand our understanding of this thing. Allie Beth Stuckey and Morgan Griffith. I don't remember what the story is, but I remember reading about it and being impressed. Claire Craig coming in with Jessica Rose. That's going to be an interesting 1-2 punch. Susan is calling out on the 21st as well. Yes. Andrew Gruel and Wilk Wilkinson, very interesting combo.
That's on Thursday, by the way. If anybody wants to watch my show on Thursday.
And Kelly Victory coming in with Ed Dowd on December 4th. She's filling in for me then. I can look up those guests. Allie Beth, I was reading her stuff.
Look at that list.
I know, it's amazing. Hold on, let me see.
I just sneak my plug in there.
Yes, good. Do you have a guest coming for that?
Yes, we do. And I'm going to say it really fast, but I don't want the psychic to know. It's
don't do it then. Okay. Just as somebody that we both know, we both like.
It's a celebrity, and it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a really good one.
She wrote a book. Is her name Allie? Hold on. Gosh. Okay, I'm going to screw this up. So, but it's the book is called "You're Not Enough, and That's Okay."
Somebody yelled, "Dr. Drew got Scott Atlas on the show."
Yeah, we had Scott Atlas. We talked to Scott Atlas.
Yeah,
and he was great.
Is he coming up again?
I would happily talk to him again. He's been going wild on X. He's been really talking.
Jessica Rose.
I think it'll be a story, more of a philosophy. I don't know.
A lot of good people on this show.
Yes, wonderful guest. And I trust Emily Barsh explicitly
kicking butt.
Because the stuff that she recommends are remarkable.
She's our content creator.
Yes, responsible for the guests we get here and the expanding our horizons through talking to.
And she's great
people.
At herding cats.
Right.
When they want to cancel at the last minute.
So we will be in here tomorrow at 3:00, and that is Allie Beth Stuckey. Really quickly, here's a Fox News report on her. Well, I don't know what it is. Didn't come up. Okay, thank you so much all for being here, and thank you to our guests today. We appreciate their participation. Hopefully we'll see them again soon, and we thank you all out on the Restream and the Rumble Rants. I'm watching you guys there.
Thank you for following. We have like 17,000 people over on X and YouTube, and 1,000 over on Rumble, and we really appreciate you guys joining us live. It really makes us feel good.
Yeah, we can. And if you have other things you'd like us to do, please do let us know. Go to dr.com/contact. Is that where we go? /contact?
No, yes, drdrew.com.
And make suggestions there.
No, contact at drdrew.com.
Okay.
But also, we just really appreciate everybody's support of our sponsors. Go to drdrew.com/sponsors. You can get all the discounts. You can buy stuff for the holidays, for your family, and just get healthy.
We're very lucky to have the people that support us, and we're grateful for them. And we're grateful for you guys as well. And we'll be back again tomorrow at 3:00. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.